together because I put this together because, so many people collect and they don't properly envelope or they don't properly know what to do with it. And this is more about the benefits of collecting and what to do, basically. I hope you find it useful. Some of you, if you guys were in the bryophyte chapter, you've probably seen this before. Sorry to play it again for you, but hopefully you'll get something out of it, even if you already work in an herbarium and know it well. So I'm going to talk about the historic collections, what is an herbarium, what and how are they used, what to do with your collections, process of entering into herbarium, how to get involved with herbarium collections, and why your collections are so important. So I wanted to start with this fun little thing about the historic collections of mosses, and I just love these. They're very old. These ones look like they're from the 1800s, and somebody glued them into the book, and that was probably the first field guide and first everything about mosses. Really cute. Here's another a page showing really small lichen or small ones glued to the page. They're neat. Can you always get every single species from an area? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's useful when you have nothing at all at that time in the 1800s, but they're pretty neat. So the downfall is, they may not be in order of the species. They're glued, so you can't really reuse them. And they're not usable for any future study except to look and say, well, that's cool. Here's another, some other ones. At the bottom, you can see somebody made volumes of them, which would be interesting. And it looks like these were probably in order. Here's a one page to the right where it has on one page two anemodons. And the top one is kind of a little bit more fancier. I get a kick out of these. Here's some more collections. Some of them are glued to flat boards or just glued to a big page that has the specimen envelope and a bunch of information. Again, not really user friendly or usable for the future if they're completely glued to the page. And then here's a really cool one. Obviously, there's a lot of fungi damage or even mold damage, but the middle one, Funaria hygrometrica, I just love how in the middle they kind of made it into like this artwork where in the middle is like all the young ones with a straight seta, and then as you go out on both sides it becomes more mature and the seta is curling. And then here's another one with a whole bunch of physidins, and it's nice to kind of see all the different variations of physidins from an area. I don't know, it's kind of cute. I like it. But again, a lot of mold, a lot of damage. Will they ever be useful? Well, you're not going to be able to pull any of these and put them under a microscope, really. And then here's another issue where envelopes get glued to a big page. And who can think of the problems with this? Somebody want to volunteer? Any comments on this?
Try to get the material out of one of those packets and then getting it back in.
Well, that, and what if another herbarium wants to borrow and do work on one? Are you going to send the whole sheet?
That's what we did in New York Botanical Garden.
So they were like this, and you sent the whole sheet with all of them? Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
It's all the same species and usually from the same area, so it's just more material for them to see.
Well, that's true. Yeah, if you had all the species on one page, I could see that totally. Okay, and then I got this great definition of an herbarium from University of Florida Herbarium. It says an herbarium is a collection of plant samples preserved for long-term study, usually in the form of dried and pressed plants mounted on paper. The dried and mounted plant samples are generally referred to as herbarium specimens. So how are they used? To store all plant-related species, including vascular plants, tree parts, seeds, lichens, bryophytes, fungi, algae, wood parts. An herbarium will also have a whole bunch of library books, journals, reprints, maps, and illustrations. Many times they're historic. And the purpose, of course, is to document and track species and use as references for identification. So here's just a couple of examples of some non-vascular herbariums. These particularly, I'm pointing out to some of the lichen ones. This is the one that we have at ECR. This was the mess I inherited, and I've been trying to clean it up and make it nicer. The one on the right was my first herbarium I put together back in like 1999 at BLM in Southern Oregon. They just had piles of boxes of collections, and they said, why don't you put these together? I'm like, okay. So I did, and each drawer will carry 2 rows of envelopes. And you can see, like, even on the ones on the left, there's a space above that you're kind of missing out on, which is further fixed in this method of collections where you put them actually in palm manila folders. So they're for palm leaves originally, but instead they're used for specimens. So you open one and you have all of the loose specimens in there, and you can pull whatever out you need. The nice thing about this is that, you know, you can see all the labels. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but you usually have the labels of the species, and then you can kind of pull them out a little at a time if you need. But the other cool thing is that it fills more of the space, unlike the drawers do. So in many cases, you can, you know, bring all these down and just fill all the spaces. But then when you add, you're going to have to readjust everything. So you end up with a big space anyway. So it doesn't matter if you have these or a drawer. I don't know. I'm pretty indifferent to it. This is, by the way, this is at Berkeley. So you've collected a moss. Here's some of our crew. Andy's in this picture. He's here with us today. He's come out and played with us. This is some of my crew down in San Diego at Torrey Pines doing some collections. We've even had students. This one on the left was collecting moss and doing a study on fungi that is growing within the moss cells, in between the cells. And that paper is about ready to come out. The middle is just kind of a little example of my mapping system. So a lot of these spots are either collections, actual collections, or and they're also, you know, where we've covered in the area. So even if we don't collect, I'll put a spot in there and say collected and put the date, or not collected, sorry. We went through and we surveyed this area. So you can see kind of the progression we're making and how much we've covered in land. Some of the collection methods are different between people. This is Lauren and Jake. A lot of you guys know Lauren and Jake because they've come to So Be Free. They're my core crew members. They're amazing. As you can see, they're carrying like these lunch boxes, and in those lunch boxes has this like plastic thing in there so nothing gets smashed in there. And they'll come in with a whole bunch of fresh, empty envelopes in there, and that's how they collect. So they put all the envelopes directly into those, and that's how they collect for the day. For me, I collect in these containers. I find that because I collect both lichens and bryophytes, and a lot of the lichens in Southern California are micro and tiny, so I collect a whole bunch of them. It's just easier for me to just put them together. And one of the things is each one of my containers will be numbered, like, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through, so that when I take a GPS point, like on the far right, here's my date, and you can see number 6, 7, and 8. So I made all the collections into 6, 7, and 8, which would be 6, 7, and 8. So these 3 pockets here will be all from this collection. And that will help me from when I'm into the herbarium and I go in and I start going through them. I know what the GPS is and what date and all the information. And I'll put little notes. This is a drainage with lepro. The lepro is short for lepraria, which is a lichen. It was just kind of a note to remind me where it was. If you click on it, you'll get the actual GIS. You'll also get an altitude. I don't use MapPad's elevation. I don't trust it. It's usually off some. But anyway, you can also hit options and you can take pictures of the site if you wanted. So you take this data and then there's some of this is the actual location of it. This is a nice well-shaded forested area with a rock boulders next to a riparian area. And you can see the La Praria, which is this like powdery, bright greenish lichen. That's how I know where it is. And then sometimes I'll take a bunch of pictures of the local flora so that later I can add it, the flora list also to my envelope. So here's my field envelope. You'll have a lot of things that you can circle, and then the location and flora. So you take that, take your data, and then I start filling it out. So for that one site, because I have 6, 7, and 8 full of lichens and bryos, I will fill all this out for that one site. Huge boulder on outcrops, mostly shaded, riparian. It's on limestone, forest, music, woodland, and then I'll start saying what the dominant trees are, and then the dominant plant species. And I've actually, these are much bigger when I finalize it, because I collect I don't collect the plants, but I do document as much as I can. This was in Joint Base Camp Bolus in San Antonio. And yeah, and then Shannon, I put myself and Shannon. Shannon was the natural resource manager for that base, and she hosted me out there, luckily. So I take that information. This is only my field data, and I'll make copies and fold them up, and they're ready to go for number, I think, was it 6, 7, and 8. And then I'll start grabbing each one. And for each one that I grab, I will put a species name and the collection number. Everything else is already filled out for that site. So then I'll just keep doing that, and they'll get loaded up into these drawers of my collection. And then this is a snapshot of my database. This is actually more recent. But I kind of color code stuff. So all the green is what I've identified to species. All the white I haven't identified yet, but have notes. Pink is usually very rare or new stuff that I found, or questionable. And then the blue is, yes, I have pictures of it. It's just like little color coding things of mine. And then this third eye, or the fourth one, is all the myself, CC, and then all the collectors who are with me that day. And then sometimes if I'm behind on my collections, I will have a temporary number, but then it gets loaded into my current accessioning number, and then the date, and then your location. This happened to be more recent. We just got done with San Elijo State Beach in San Diego, and then I did the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Corona. You put the county, the elevation, and then the township section range, and next to that is usually the quarter. In this case, there was no quarter. So I had to use west of, and then you put your GIS data. Here's another snapshot of my list. This is more recent, So Be Free, Roberts Ranch. So this is all the species I've collected and ones that I have completed, green, in species, and ones I'm still working on, and possible rare or new species. And then the same basic data, like lichens collected on oaks, at riparian, Long Trail, and all the other data. It's typical. And then at the same time, when I'm going through these, I will have a folder. This is for the Roberts Ranch. And then I take every picture I can of each species, and I will put them in each folder. So if I clicked on one of these, you would have several different pictures of that species. It has the specimen number. And if you could look at some of these, I have X, and that means I didn't actually collect it. Like some of them were very hard to get off the rock, like some of the xanthoparmelias, unless I had more time. So I would take good details of the pictures, and I would put the collection date where I collected other collections, so I know where that site was, and then just put an X that tells me I don't have this collection. It's just a picture. And so I take the field envelope. Sometimes I'll have a whole drawer full of those or whatever. And then when I get time, I enter them into our database. And then this is where they get transferred from this envelope to an acid-free herbarium envelope. I'll put them, so UCR has our own database, and then we enter into that database, and then it gets uploaded into the consortium later. And once you get it into the database, then you can start printing up actual final labels. So this is a example of a final label, an old collection from 2004 in San Bernardino. It has everything. And actually, our database will actually make it like bryophytes of San Bernardino, bryophytes of. I just forgot to click it on this one. So it's now plants of. But it has all the information you'll need. If you have other collectors, those people will show up on this label as well. And then eventually it gets accessioned from here. So then I take this envelope that I use, and I will cut out this back part, and it actually gets inserted into the envelope, your final herbarium envelope. And this is why it's so important to write down as many of the species that you can and get all that data in there, because you won't have to type up all of the species. It'll just be part of the record of that envelope and that moss. So getting involved with, oh wait, do you guys have any questions yet before I move on? When it comes to herbarium?
I guess I had a question. When you're actually submitting it to the herbarium, is there any other further preparation that you're doing to try to maybe remove some of the substrate or keep the substrate in there? Try to clean it up a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. So there are sections. There's a description. So in our database, you can write in a description, and like for example, in this one, it says huge boulder outcrops, mostly shaded. This is the Camp Bulla. So this one would have also continued to say, next to a riparian. So all of that kind of stuff gets loaded into our database, and it shows up on the label. Like if you look at the bottom, it says rock outcrop and dry drainage, 23 to 30% canopy cover. You try to get as detailed as you can. I personally also put in identification notes. So like this one, I actually put in the identification, like what helped me identify to schistidium, piculus, cribos, peristome, isodiametric, exothecal cells. Those are like key characters that help me to get to that species, so that anybody can read this and be like, oh, okay, yeah, that is for that species. You try to kind of just, I don't know, it's just something I've always done.
Right. I was more asking about the physical material that's going in the envelope. Like, say, if you collected something on rotting wood, is that something you're going to store in the herbarium as well? Like the substrate?
On rotting? Yeah. I mean, unless you can get it off the rotting. But yes. And there's also waxy, like bags you can put them in if you need to. Like sometimes we get a lot of small, tiny stuff, and it's just better to have them in either waxy bags. There's a couple things, and I didn't talk about this in this talk, but there's also ways you can make it so it doesn't move around. You don't need to glue it in there and anything. You don't need to glue anything on a board. What you can do is get batting. And sometimes I have these hard boards. It's kind of like manila folder consistency. We call them boards. And you can actually glue this batting on. And I do this for like the tiny, tiny liverworts that you don't want like, disintegrating into the envelope. You can put them on the board, put the batting, glue the batting on there, and then just put the lichens or the liverworts or the tiny stuff on there, and they won't move around. And you can do like different, like I have 2 different thicknesses of batting. You can go to Joann's Fabrics and usually get batting. But you have like a thin one, and you can get like thicker ones to hold things in place. There's also jewelry boxes, like little box, cardboard jewelry boxes. You can also glue on those boards, and it won't move around again. It'll stay in that little tiny box on the board.
The Missouri Botanical Garden actually on small samples puts it all into a much smaller envelope inside the standard envelope.
Yeah, you can do that too.
And
I
that's
sometimes will get that batting and I'll glue half of it, and then I'll put a specimen in there, and then I fold it over, and it just stays like that in the envelope. So it's great. You pull it out and you're like, oh, there it is. I think it's all a matter of, what works for you. What do you prefer? I know that a previous lichenologist was gluing everything, and I started doing that too. And then I was like, this isn't working. And then I read somewhere, some herbarium was like, do not glue, or I don't remember where I read it, but it was highly suggested that you do not glue rocks with lichens on it onto a board. And I can see why, because some of the problems I had is I wanted to go look at the specimen. And in order to do that, to spray it, you end up spraying the board, the paper board, and it gets kind of, wrinkly and destroyed. And it's just best not to do that. I don't glue stuff to boards anymore. I use batting, boxes, envelopes. Definitely. I've used the wax envelopes for the lichens on poo. All right. So any more questions? All right. So getting involved with herbarium collections, you can actually go to any herbarium and volunteer your time. And I highly suggest you could do that. If you can do that, help out, because a lot of these specimens, like I have tens of thousands of specimens and I'm so behind. Like, it would be nice to have people to help. And when we do get help, they're just like gold. You can assist with identification, which would make you a better identifier. You can assist with data entry, and you can assist with accessioning and enveloping. And some of the plant people might adopt you to glue plants. So if you work on identifications or updating names, you need to add an annotation slip. And here's my annotation slips that I use. There's 2 different types. There's a determination and there's just an update one. And the difference is putting this equal sign. And then there's other annotation slips, like if you happen to do DNA work, or in lichens, if you happen to do TLC, thin layer chromatography, and you get results, you can put in those slips into the envelope, and those annotation slips, become a permanent record of that specimen forever. So here's some examples. I was doing some work at the museum in San Diego at the herbarium there, and John Redmond had collected a moss or something, and I found this rare Spherocarpus juriae. So I took it out, I separated it out, made a new specimen, called it B, and then I also put in the identifying characteristics: spores, tetrad, no wings, and then this is my old name, I'm Coshland now, but and then the date, and then this is what you print up, or what I print up, and I slip into the envelope. And then on the right is an example of updating, where we went from all the Diddy Modons to all these new names, and all I did was just update her name, and that's where that equal sign is. Doesn't mean I've identified it. I just said, yeah, this is what it is, but it's got a new name. But then I also found, another lichen in there, a Lapraria xerophila anagremia spa. And so I went ahead and put those notes as well. So those are the 2 different main slips that I use. And then here's some examples of some other people's slips. You can see on the left, this person got the name, and then they got really detailed. They had like, well, what am I going to answer when I ID this lichen? And they have everything. And they included little diagrams, the side of the parathecium, and then a cross section of the parathecium showing the ascus in the middle. And then it shows like the spores are one septate down here, and you can see that. Here's the spore, here's the septate going across. He even has the sizes, size ranges, which is all good because those are all identifying characteristics. Again, I don't print up all of these details. I just will write them if they're pertinent to the identification. On the top here, we have a James Lendemer. So he's a lichenologist and of New York Botanical Gardens. He did a TLC, a thin layer chromatography. It shows that he used solvent C. In TLC, there's 3 different solvents. This is the most common one because it has a longer shelf life. And he didn't find any secondary metabolites. So that's what he writes in here. No substances detected. Still very important in identification of lichens because it tells you it's not these other ones that may have them. So, and then you can almost kind of read a story of the history of these specimens. If you look at the bottom one, this one was collected by B. Ryan, which was also a prominent lichenologist in California. So he collected this, not sure when he collected it. And then he sent it out to Frank Bunkart, who he's actually from Germany, and he happened to be in Germany at that time. But he's normally out of Arizona State University. So he sends it over to Frank back in 2005, and Frank says, it is this. And unfortunately, this little slip doesn't say, it should connect it back to this one. Even though it's in the envelope, you should always still put at least the specimen number. In this case, the number's cut off because I know Ryan did probably tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of collections. So, he should have put that in there. But, you can kind of see the story, forming here where Frank is working on Bulias. He's kind of being the expert at it for now. And Ryan sends it over to him and he IDs it. It gets back to him and then he gets to update it into the herbarium. The one on the right, this is from it was annotated in 1983. It doesn't say, this one doesn't have enough information. We know it was probably old because the annotation states that this is apparently an undetermined species of Polydesma, probably close to, and then he names another species. And then he annotated this in 1983. This is part of the specimen, so it's not like it's going to get lost. But you should always put in the number of this original specimen, just so that in case it falls out or nobody put it back in there, you can always put this back in because this is a permanent record. We want to keep these with the specimen. And the bottom one, where he has 4837, I don't know if that's his annotation number notes or is that, or is the top one specimen number Corin or Coupon 11? Is that the specimen number in the name? I don't really know. So there's not enough information. I think you should always be able to tie these annotation slips to the specimen better. Like if you go to the Lendemer one on the top from New York Botanical Gardens, he doesn't actually do it either. He says plate lane, but he doesn't actually tie it to the specimen number. So yeah, not enough information. All right, so here's some more examples. This is a Frank one where he did TLC and he has 8 potential secondary metabolites that could pop up during TLC. And in this case, only one of them came up. And he actually includes a little example of the specimen he used to do TLC. So this is the actual TLC specimen that he puts in the envelope. But then he also does this secondary annotation. And he just says what it is and when he did it. Personally, I think it should be tied together if it was the same one. The last one here is the most interesting, and this is where I say these annotation slips are so amazing because they tell that story, right? So this was a collection from let's see, 1884. So it says here on the top, collected by Robinson, date 1884. Down here in Melbourne Botanic Gardens, this is from Australia, by the way. Here's the species. He names it in 1884 by Robbins. He says this is Frulania crispata. And then later in 18, no, that's 1880, or is that 1980? That must have been a later one. Mm-hmm. But one, no, that one's I can't even read that. Probably 1887. Someone writes, this is an isotype. This is the first time somebody named it. This is the first time somebody collected it. Frulania crispata. Then in the top one, which I can't tell if it's 1880 or 1980, he writes also isotype. And then finally, in 1910, someone says, finally determines officially, this is an isotype. This is the isotype, and he remakes the whole entire thing. And this is a different person. So it's kind of neat because when you see these annotation slips, you almost see this like history of the specimen, and it's pretty cool. And it looks like they may have either glued it on top of the envelope or they just pulled it out for the picture. I'm not sure. So it's really important. If you look at somebody else's specimen, try to have annotation slips with you, even if you write them. I personally like to type them, but it's nice if like you're at one of those workshops and you're looking at somebody else's stuff and then you don't have annotation, bring some blank annotation, or even if you forget your annotation slips, write it on a piece of paper and say, you know, Chris Coshland ID'd this and agree with this is what it is. Even if it's the same species that 3 other people confirmed, the more confirmation, the more it solidifies that specimen. And, you know, you should have a say. You spent time on it. You identified it, you confirmed it, or you updated the name, whatever. Just put that in there, get it in as a record of that envelope. So getting involved with the herbarium, this is the herbarium I work at, and here's Lauren and I working on stuff on the left. And at the top, I had a doctorate lichenologist working with me, and at the bottom, this is an example of, this is a volunteer at our herbarium who is taking pictures, which is the box. I've seen at Frank's lab, they have like smaller ones for small lichens and bryophytes. We don't have anything like that. But this is what they would use, a box similar to this with a light and then the camera on top, and it gets digitally snapped, and then it goes into the computer, and then he gets it uploaded into the portal. So when you go into the portal and you see all those like, you know, digitized specimens, that's how it's done. And that's usually somebody back there doing it. On the far right, this is a longtime helper of our herbarium, Teresa, and she's just helping another student. So the purpose of herbarium collections. Here's an example. This is a Marsupella belanderi. When I first started here, we had in San Diego County, we only had these 2 at the very, very bottom collections. And then we had a couple, thanks to Ben Carter, who collected on the islands. And since then, we have done a lot of, or this was the original collections over here. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but if not, under Del Mar, this whole area is Torrey Pines where we've been working. And we've been slowly adding, even outside of Torrey Pines, we've been adding more collections that we find. So they're not uploaded in the portal yet, but we've been slowly adding and learning that maybe this is a little bit more prevalent and may not be as rare down there. So this is why it's really important to document these things, get them into the portal. And then it helps people, even like me, before I go and survey, I will go look at these things and be like, okay, what's out there? What should I be looking for? And when you find stuff, how important it is I mean, this is going to help determine whether we claim that this is considered rare in Southern California or not, right? So yeah, this second picture, by the way, is from iNaturalist, because we haven't really got some of these into the portal yet. But it's just an example to explain that when people are out there looking for them and we start finding them, then we have better records and how important those records are. And that's it. That's all I had. Any questions?